ये important है. The other in Sambhal also plainly reveals some of the original structures of Hindu temple so well known as the traditional spot where the 10th or the Nishkalank avatar, Kalki avatar, spotless incarnation of Vishnu will one day appear. What is the most burning issue in India today? सबसे ज्यादा हंगामा किस बात पे हो रहा है? औरंगजेब. Hmm. There are some people who think uh, it's called as a Jinda Peer, almost worship you can say. वो टोपियां सिलता था so that people don't have to spend for his grave. Hmm? He donated so much of wealth for the temples. I mean, this is what is said. And how do we know? Because all the historians that you have read through NCRT, they have told us. But they have not given any reference of. The fact is that all the historians of this period since independence, particularly after when NCRT came into being. Now in Germany, when after Second World War, there was a big debate whether we should include that atrocities by Nazis in the history or not. And contrasting views were there. And finally, they concluded that it is a must because our next generation must know what happened to us so that we can learn from them. But when NCRT was there, the same issue was there. Nurul Hassan was the CM, education minister, and he gave guidelines to all the historians to write books taking care of two things. Firstly, do not criticize the medieval rulers. And secondly, do not highlight anybody other than Nehru and Gandhi family in the freedom struggle. And they have been very honest in their job. Lal Bal Pal, one para. Aham dynasty, for 600 years they have been there. Didn't submit to the Mughals and the British. No mention. Medieval Indian teachers, they don't teach Vijayanagar Empire. Hmm? It was the richest, the wealthiest, and the most well managed empire in the world, and they don't talk about. Jahangir, in his Tuzuki Jahangir, he writes that myself and my father, my Abu Akbar, we could not sleep for a single night peacefully because every day somebody or the other would revolt, and despite we have killed more than 5 lakh people, no mention in history. Is it possible that you have a king and they didn't do any atrocity? But that was an order. So this dispute that is there, it is because of that only. दोनों ग्रुप जो हैं उनको हिस्ट्री भी नहीं आती, इनको भी नहीं आती. Both are being governed by emotions. If we study history, if we analyze, ठीक है गलती हो गई, इतिहास हो गया, मिट्टी पाओ यार, मुकाओ गल. Let us make a new beginning and start afresh. औरंगजेब इज सो ग्रेट, वो कहेंगे उसने ये किया, उसने वो किया. They don't, both of them don't give any evidences. Actually, whenever you talk about history, even sociology, anthropology, political science, you have to give reference. You have to give the chain of narration. If what happened at that time is written by today's historian, what is his reference? Chain of narration has to be there. So if you want to study the medieval history, you have to study the historians of those times. And who was the historian? Ibn Battuta was there, Minhaj Siraj was there, and number of them, Afif was there. But today's historians don't talk about them. So there is a series, 8 books are there by Eliot and Dawson. The history of India as told by its own historians. They have translated all those books from Persian, and that is the best reference of history of that time. I consulted more than 50 books on that, written during British time, like this one. This is a book by W. W. Hunter. W. W. Hunter, 1882. How many years passed? Almost 53, 143, something like that. There was no RSS, no BJP, no Muslim League, even Congress was not there. I have just taken one para from Hunter. What he says, the popular notion that India fell an easy prey to the Musliman is opposed to the historical facts. आपकी हिस्ट्री की किताबें बताती हैं कि हिंदूज दे सरेंडर्ड. सोमनाथ पे जब हमला हुआ तो गौरी जो है वो गया और उसने जो है वो लोग घंटी बजा रहे थे कि भगवान हमारी रक्षा करो. Historical fact is that going from outside to enter the sanctum sanctorum, it took 1 week for him. So much of resistance was there. At least 1,50,000 people were killed. No mention in history. So Hindus were weak, Hindus were coward, Hindus surrendered everything. That's why they ruled throughout the world. Mohammedan rule in India consists of a series of invasion and partial conquests during 11 centuries from Usman's raid in 636 and Ahmad Shah Abdali's tempest of invasion in 1761. Actually, Usman's reference is not there generally, and it is not trusted also by historians even in the West. The first recorded evidence we have from 712 when the northwest region of India, now in Pakistan, that was invaded. And but again, thereafter, for 300 years, they could not dare to attack. And there is no reference out of that. If they are not attacking for 300 years, why shouldn't they? They could get plenty of wealth even in the one. The details of that are given in a book which is called Chachnama. I read that book also. It's a small booklet. Raja Dahir was there. Raja Dahir belonged to my lineage. They represent in Indian history the overflow of the nomad tribes of Central Asia to the southeast, as the Huns, Turks, and various Tatar tribes disclose in the early European annals the westward movement from the same great breeding ground of nations. At no time was Islam triumphant throughout all India. उनका आर्ग्यूमेंट क्या है? औरंगजेब यूनिफाइड द कंट्री. साउथ में कभी था ही नहीं. Deccan में also he was there for 20 years and died there. You know, if you want to talk about a single lineage in the history of India during medieval period and later, one single lineage that you can point out is the Sisodias. Rajasthan never submitted to. That's why the name of Rajasthan is there in your national anthem. Name of Kashmir is not there. Name of Assam is not there. Because they were not a part of British Empire. But then they say that no, it was not written in the praise of George Pancham. Then in whose praise it was? Anyway, powerful Hindu dynasties ruled over a large area, at tribute and sent agents to the imperial court. But even this modified supremacy of Delhi lasted for a little over a century, 1578 to 707. Towards praise from Akbar to Aurangzeb, almost 150 years of, you can say, Mughal rule is there, and you are given a full volume to study on medieval India, highlighting these people. You had Vijayanagara Empire almost 300 years, hardly 2 pages. I told you, medieval historians, they don't teach. Cholas, Cheras, Chalukyas, Ahams, where is just passing references? So there was a deliberate attempt. Even when Nehru in 1953 said that I am an accidental Hindu, by tradition I am a Muslim, and by knowledge and education I am a Christian. That showed his intentions. And these continued through this dynasty, Nehru dynasty. So that was this. Now, who was the last Mughal emperor? Bahadur Shah Zafar. How big was his empire? It was from Mehrauli to Yamuna. How big it is? Mehrauli, how far it is from here? Around 30 kilometers. And how far Yamuna is there? And they call him the Emperor of India. But genuinely he was the Emperor of India because whole of the country supported him in 1857. Though he ruled a very small territory. I took a major portion from another book. I mean, if viewers like it, I prefer the book by M.A. Khan. M.A. Khan is a Pakistani now living in Canada. I don't know he is still alive or not. Islamic Jihad in India. That is the most authentic book about the issue I want to discuss. And now this is Indian Islam, More Titus. And this is quite comparatively recent, 1930, less than 100 years. I am taking up just one issue about Islam in India. It is systematic cloth destruction and looting. First is Mahmud of Ghazni, first adopted. I have already told you about Chachnama. And this is just taken from Eliot and Dawson, volume 2, page 27. Each and everything must be quoted with reference. Then at Mutra is Mathura. We are told that Mahmud was greatly impressed by the beauty and the size of the buildings, but in spite of the fact, Al-Utbi says that he gave orders that all the temples should be burnt with naphtha and fire and leveled to the ground. Finish. The slaughtering of infidels seemed to be one thing that gave Mahmud particular pleasure. In one attack on Chandrai in 1019 AD, many infidels were slain or taken prisoners, and Muslims paid no regard to booty until they had satiated themselves with the slaughter of the infidels and worshippers of sun and fire. सूरज और आग की जो पूजा करने वाले हैं, जब तक कि उनको खत्म नहीं कर दिया, उसने इस बात की चिंता भी नहीं की कि कितना माल लूटा गया, गिना ही नहीं किसी ने. Not infrequently, the slaughter of the enemy gave a great basket to the indigenous culture of the Hindus, as in the conquest of Bihar by Muhammad Bakhtiar Khilji. बख्तियार खिलजी के बारे में मैं हमेशा कहता रहा हूं, नालंदा को जलाया उसने, एंड स्टिल द नेबरिंग रेलवे स्टेशन इज बख्तियारपुर. I've been saying it's shame on rulers, it's shame on Indians that we can't even change this name. When he took certain place, the Tawaqat-e-Nasiri informs us that the great plunder fell into the hands of the victors. Most of the inhabitants were Brahmins with shaven heads. Actually, they could be Buddhists also with shaven heads. They were put to death. Large number of books were found, but no one could explain the content as all of the men had been killed. The whole fort and city being the place of study. नालंदा का हाल ये था कि वहां एडमिशन लेने के लिए कोचिंग की जरूरत पड़ती थी, जैसे अब होता है. 15,000 students and 1,500 teachers, maybe half of them. इत सिंह ने लिखा है, चाइनीज ने, कि अगर चाइनीज लोग एडमिशन लेना चाहते हैं तो वो भूल जाएं. मैंने अपनी किताब में लिखा भी है कि क्या स्कीम थी एजुकेशन की, किस वक्त क्या क्या पढ़ना पड़ता था, और 15 साल की उम्र तक आते यू वर इन ए पोजिशन वेयर यू कुड बी ए प्रकांड पंडित ऑफ एनी वन सब्जेक्ट। इसी ने क्लियरली लिखा है कि जो कमजोर दिल वाले हैं, जो दिमाग से कमजोर है मेहनत करने में, वो कोशिश भी ना करें। यहाँ जो है टैक्सिला है या नालंदा है या जैसी भी यूनिवर्सिटीज है। Of the destruction of temples and the desecration of idols, we have an abundance of evidence. Muhammad bin Qasim carried out his plan of destruction systematically in Sindh, as we have seen, but he made an exception of the famous temple at Multan. हिस्टोरियन इसका एग्जाम्पल देते हैं कि देखो मुल्तान का मंदिर छोड़ दिया ना उसने, लेकिन आगे देखो, for the purpose of revenue, as this temple was a place of resort for pilgrims who made large gifts to the idol. Nevertheless, while he thus satisfied his avarice by letting the temple stand, he gave vent to his malignity by having a piece of cow's flesh tied around the neck of the idol. मूर्ति के गले में गाय के मांस का एक टुकड़ा बांध दिया। ये उनकी, अगेन ऑल दीज रेफरेंसेस आर देयर। Minhaj, Utli Minhaj further tells how Mahmud became widely known for having destroyed as many as 1,000 temples, and of his great feat of destroying the temple of Somnath and carrying off his idol, which he asserts was broken into 4 parts. सोमनाथ के मंदिर की जो है मूर्ति को 4 टुकड़ों में बांट दिया। 1 part deposited in Jami Masjid of Ghazni, 1 he placed at the entrance of the royal palace, the 3rd he sent to Mecca, and the 4th to Medina. और ये हिस्टोरियंस और ये मौलवी कहते हैं कि नहीं भाई, इस्लाम इज ए रिलीजन ऑफ पीस। वो तो किंग थे, तो देयर जॉब वाज टू स्प्रेड, देयर जॉब वाज टू स्प्रेड देयर किंगडम। इफ दे आर स्प्रेडिंग देयर रिलीजन, दे आर मिशनरीज। और मिशनरीज भी कई तरह के होते हैं, जरूरत पड़ेगी तो आई टॉक अबाउट कुतुबुद्दीन ऐबक, आप सबने पढ़ा है। As is said to have destroyed nearly 1,000 temples and then raised mosques on their foundations. The same author states that he built the Jami Masjid at Delhi and adorned it with the stones and gold obtained from the temples, which had been demolished by elephants and covered with the inscriptions from the Quran, containing the divine commands. ये शायद कुतुब मीनार की बात कर रहा है, because Jama Masjid was not there. We have further evidence of this borrowing process having been systematically employed from the inscription extant over the eastern gateway of the same mosque at Delhi, which relates that the material of 27 idols temples was used in its construction. ये प्लेक लगी हुई है वहां पे कुतुब मीनार के पास, 26 लिखा हुआ शायद, या 27 मंदिरों को तोड़ करके उसके पार्ट्स, एंड देयर हैज बीन अ बिग डिबेट अबाउट इट। इन 1984 देयर वाज एन आर्टिकल इन टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया अबाउट दिस, और सारे हिस्टोरियंस, इरफान हबीब, रोमिला थापर, ये वो, आई थिंक ऑलमोस्ट 20 और मे बी 80, दे रोट ए लेटर टू टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया कि इस तरह की बुलशीट आप लोग जो है छापते हो तो इससे जो है वो टेंशन पैदा होती है। रियलिटी मस्ट नॉट बी नोन। वही कुछ कर रहे थे वो, आज भी वही कुछ कर रहे हैं। Even in the matter of this ढांचा, which Supreme Court called a structure, they didn't call it Babri Masjid. When the debate came out and when the documents were shown, many of the documents are in Sanskrit because of that period. वेस्ट के पास एक भी हिस्टोरियन नहीं था जिसको संस्कृत आती हो। आई हैव अ फर्म कन्विक्शन कि अगर आपको एंशियंट पढ़ाना है तो आप संस्कृत और पाली आनी चाहिए, आपको मिडिवल पढ़ाना है तो आपको पर्शियन आनी चाहिए, आपको मॉडर्न पढ़ाना है तो आपको इंग्लिश आनी चाहिए। नहीं आती तो सीखो भाई, ओरिजिनल टेक्स्ट के बिना क्या पढ़ाओगे? पढ़ के पढ़ाना कोई टीचर थोड़ी होता है कोई। देन अलाउद्दीन खिलजी is talking about zeal to build a second minar to the Jami to rival one built by the Qutbuddin, set by Amir Khusro, not only to have dug stones out of the hills but to have demolished temples of the infidels to furnish a supply. In his conquest of South India, The destruction of temples was carried out by Alauddin as systematically as it had been in the north by his predecessors. Sultan Firoz Shah in his Futuhat-e-Firoz Shahi geographically relates. Again, these are the references which are given there. Actually, for most of the time, they ruled North India, Central India up to that. And that is why in this region you do not find ancient temples because nothing was left. In the south, till today, we have very, very ancient temples because they could not. And these temples, they are national heritage. I firmly believe that when you say ancient India, James Mill was there, the historian who divided Indian history into Hindu India, Muslim India, British India. The fact is, when you talk about history in ancient India, there was nothing called as religion. So, ancient Indian culture is our cultural heritage, national cultural heritage. You cannot attach the tag of Hindu to that. Hmm? When they did this in the city, Delhi and Envans in opposition to the law of the Prophet, which declares that such are not to be tolerated under divine guidance, I destroyed these edifices. I killed those leaders of infidelity and punished others with stripes until this abuse was entirely abolished. And where mercy performed their devotion, where stripes until this abuse was sorry, and where infidels and idolaters worshipped idols, Muslims now by God's mercy perform their devotion to the true God. That has been the big issue in Islam versus others. No other religion claims that our God is the true God. Our God is our God. But what they say, Ya ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. And that is a cause of conflict with every other community in the world. Hmm? With the destruction of the temples also went the destruction of the implements of worship, and no doubt very often the sacred books. Firoz Shah takes special pain to note how he made his destruction complete. The new temple was destroyed, and I also ordered that the infidels' books, the idols, and the vessels used in the worship should all be burned. I think biggest blunder of Islam has been destroying the books. नॉलेज डिस्ट्रॉय करने से क्या मिलेगा तुम्हें भाई यू आर इन ए वे आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द बैकवर्डनेस ऑफ ह्यूमंस एज ए स्पीसीज नॉलेज तो चाहिए ही और अगर नॉलेज अवेलेबल है तो यू मूव अहेड विद दैट नॉलेज एज अ बेस लेकिन नॉलेज डिस्ट्रॉय कर दिया यू अगेन हैव टू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम स्क्रैच बट दे हैव बीन डूइंग फिरोज शाह then even in the reign of Shah Jahan, we read of the destruction of the temple that Hindus had started to rebuild, and the account of this direct attack on the piety of the Hindus is solemnly recorded in Badshah Nama, Abdul Hamid Lahori, Eliot and Dawson, Volume 7, page 36. All this is, it was left to Aurangzeb to make a final attempt to overthrow idolatry. The author of Alamgiri dilates upon his efforts to put down Hindu teaching and his destruction of the temples as follows. In April 1669, Aurangzeb learnt, उसने देखा कि बहुत सारे लोग जो हैं वो ब्राह्मण के यहाँ पढ़ने जाते हैं जिसमें हिंदूज भी हैं मुस्लिम्स भी है फिर उसके साथ जो हाल किया उन्होंने वो सारा उन्होंने लिखा हुआ है This was not all. Perhaps the most vigorous attempt made by Aurangzeb and one that showed his fanatical attitude towards Indians more than any other single act was his treatment of the sacred city of Mathura. जो लफड़ा आज चल रहा है वो The same writer tells how in December 1669 this justice-loving monarch ordered the destruction of Hindu temple of Mathura known as Dera Keshurai and soon that stronghold of infidelity was leveled to the ground. Then follows a glorification of the piety of the emperor and his mighty works for the cause of Islam in these works. अब कितनी सारी बातें बताऊं मैं आपको। हम्म। मथुरा का कर दिया उधर। 10 years later, we read that Khan Jahan Bahadur arrived from Jodhpur, bringing several cartloads of idols taken from Hindu temples that had been raised, and that His Majesty proceeded to Chittor on the first of month of Safar of that year, and temples to the number of 63 were here demolished. Abu Turab, who had been commissioned to effect the destruction of the temples at Amber, reported inter alia that 60 of these edifices have been leveled within the ground. Three scores means 60 and 66. पूरी हिस्ट्री जो है भरी हुई है इन बातों से कि इट वॉज नॉट जस्ट द रूल, इट वॉज नॉट जस्ट द टेरिटरी, it was just following what is said in Quran, what is followed in Islam. But yet, the last but not the least, the most important issue concerning today, it is what? It says the temples were not always destroyed, but by the conquerors. In some cases where the buildings were at all suitable, they were converted into mosques and enlarged and modified to such an extent that one would not at the present time easily suspect that such a transformation had been made. मतलब जितने भी कोशिश हो सकी, अगर मंदिर बड़ा है मजबूत है तो कोशिश कर दिया जाए कलश की जगह वहां डोम लगा करके, और जो कुछ बदलाव हो सकते थे। और इसका अपना जो है टाइटस का, टू सच मॉक्स आई हैव सीन, वन एट अमरोहा वेयर द चेन दैट सपोर्टेड द बेल ऑफ द ओरिजिनल हिंदू टेम्पल इज स्टिल टू बी फाउंड हैंगिंग फ्रॉम द सीलिंग। अब बेल तो टेम्पल्स में ही होती है, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है। The other in Sambhal also plainly reveals some of the original structures of Hindu temple so well known as the traditional spot where the 10th or the Nishkalank avatar, Kalki avatar, spotless incarnation of Vishnu will one day appear. This is the issue today, that Sambhal, which they are saying that this is nothing, historically we don't have any evidence, and these people they go back and still write. Still, the general practice in dealing with temples, if they were touched at all, was to destroy them rather than to convert them into mosques. There is a big difference between Indian Islam and true Islam. We may take this issue subsequently. I'll make one more video, and thereafter I'll seek your suggestion whether you want to know more or not. But knowing history is very important to move further. I told you in the beginning, ठीक है यार, जो हुआ सो हुआ, जिसकी गलती है मानो और उसको मिट्टी पाओ। औरंगजेब हमारा कोई पुरखा नहीं था, है? बाबर जो है वो हमें यहाँ लेकर नहीं आया। We are Indian Muslims. There will be a debate. In 1970s there was a debate. Muslim Indians or Indian Muslims. MG अकबर was the editor of Sunday. बहुत सारे लोगों ने बहुत ज्यादा डिबेट किया था, खैर आज वो इररिलेवेंट है बिल्कुल। तो नेक्स्ट में जो है आई टॉक फर्दर अबाउट व्हाट इज हाउ कंकर्ड, व्हाट इज द कंट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ सूफीज। सूफीज की जितनी तारीफ की जाती है कि उसने देश को ये दिया वो दिया, किस तरह से इन्वेडर्स आए उसके पीछे पीछे सूफी आए, इन्होंने कत्ल किया, जख्मी किया, उन्होंने मरहम लगाया और कन्वर्ट किया। इसमें यहाँ के मोइनुद्दीन चिश्ती भी हैं, इसमें आपके अजमेर वाले ख्वाजा भी हैं, सारे लोग हैं, दिल्ली से लेके बंगाल तक। सोचने की बात है। थैंक यू।